A shot rings out on a cold Alaska night. A man begins to die, but not just any man. Anchorage's first police chief.
The historic Anchorage Radio Hour presents Murder Gone Cold. This is the city, Anchorage, Alaska. The time, late February 1921. Anchorage had been incorporated as a city under the territorial government for just 5 months. The territory was managed by the Federal Department of the Interior, and the U.S. Marshal Service was the law of the land when things got out of hand. This was in the days of Prohibition, and the Marshals had a big job with just a few men to cover the entire territory. It was a quiet Sunday night. A pair of men, Clarence Mossman, U.S. Marshal for the Territory of Alaska, and Frank Hoffman, Deputy U.S. Marshal from Matanuska, sit at a tidy desk, each cradling a cup of coffee.
Are you looking forward to your trip outside? I don't mind taking the prisoners to Walla Walla, but taking the nuts to Morningside Sanitarium, it gets me. Is Susie traveling with you? Not this trip. She came to town, but...
Marshals, come quick!
What's the trouble, Mr. Hunt?
It's Jack Sturgus. He's been shot.
What?
He's still alive, but he isn't making much sense. It's like he doesn't know where he is or who anybody is. It happened just down the alley behind Anchorage Drugstore. Dr. Romig and Dr. Spaulding are tending to him now.
Let's go, Frank.
Who is Jack Sturgus? Why was he shot? These questions and more after this word from our sponsors. Whether fish or fowl in Alaska, everything flies. Alaskans know there's only one fast, dependable way to ship in the territory today: air transport. Due to the tremendous distances and lack of adequate roads, air service is the lifeline for the citizens and industry of America's richest territory. Alaskans also know from experience dating back to the early days of aviation in the territory that Northern Pacific Airlines experienced pilots, efficient equipment, and trained air freight and passenger personnel add up to the swiftest, surest means of transporting any commodity anywhere in the territory. Pacific Northern Airlines offers complete passenger, mail, and air freight service to city and bush. Aircraft are available for charter and special jobs, or ask about our daily trips to Seattle, connecting at Juneau with Pan American Airlines.
Full rate and route information is available at the nearest Pacific Northern Airlines office, 505 4th Avenue, or call us at Main 26.
Early Anchorage was very much a company town. If you didn't work for the Alaska Engineering Commission, the federal organization that ran the Alaska Railroad, then you worked for a company that provided support for the AEC. Anchorage was born in 1915 on the banks of Ship Creek and was incorporated as a city in late 1920 with a population right around 2,000 year-round residents and countless more transients. The Anchorage City Council, as their second order of business, hired a police chief to help clean up the town because the U.S. Marshals were spread too thin. The town had problems with gambling, liquor, and prostitution, and the decent citizens of Anchorage wanted something done about it. In November 1920, the City Council chose John J. Sturgus, recently retired from the U.S. Marshal Service, as their caretaker, their peace officer. He started serving the town as Anchorage's first police chief on the first day of January 1921. Sturgus was known as Jack to his friends and as Black Jack to all that had crossed him and his billy club. He had served as a patrolman and a detective in Everett, Washington, before chasing gold north to the Shoshana River. That didn't pan out, so on account of his experience as a lawman, he joined the U.S. Marshal Service. Jack and his wife Anna moved to Anchorage in 1916, and tonight, someone had shot him. By the time the marshals arrived at the scene, less than a block from their office, a crowd had gathered. Sturgus had been moved out of the cold into the parlor at Richter's bathhouse, where they waited for a wagon to take Sturgus to the hospital.
Jack, who shot you? Can you tell us what happened? Jack, it's Clarence Mossman. Who did this?
Oh, it hurts. My back. Roll me over, please. Oh.
After wrapping Sturgus in blankets, he was placed on a stretcher, put on a hose wagon, and taken to the railroad hospital down on Ship Creek. Marshal Stephen Casler stayed behind to disperse the crowd and look over the crime scene, while Marshals Mossman and Hoffman went with Sturgus to the hospital. When Sturgus started as chief of police in January, he responded to a number of citizen complaints about a petty thief that was not only stealing milk from babies, but food from a storeroom as well. In early February, the City Council, acting on complaints regarding open gambling in pool rooms, cigar stores, and other places about town, instructed Sturgus to rigidly enforce the provisions of the new gambling ordinance. But these petty crimes wouldn't have warranted murder. Why hadn't Sturgus told anyone what had happened tonight? Why didn't Sturgus seem to recognize any of his friends at the scene? There were too many questions, and one of the only men with the answers was going under the knife. At the hospital, the marshals waited anxiously as Dr. Romig, along with Dr. Spaulding and Dr. Cannon, performed surgery on Jack in the operating room.
Dr. Romig, do you have news?
I'm sorry, Marshal Mossman. Chief Sturgus is dead. We knew at Richter's that his chances of survival were slim. His respiration was good, but his circulation was poor and his pulse was weak.
We tried to relieve his suffering, but we were too late. He died on the operating table just a few minutes ago.
Damn.
If you need a moment to collect yourself, Marshal, I'll let you alone.
No, it's all right, Dr. Romig. We need to ask you a few questions before we all go home for the night.
Yeah, all right, but I don't have much to tell.
Did Jack tell you anything else when he went into the operating room?
When we took him in to get x-rayed, he complained that the light hurt his eyes. We couldn't find an exit wound from the bullets, so we prepared to operate to relieve the internal hemorrhaging. We gave him an anesthetic so we could operate, but he never regained consciousness.
But what can you tell me about his wounds?
There was only one wound, from a gunshot. The x-ray revealed that the bullet ended up in his lower back near his spine, but he was shot in the chest near his heart. It didn't fracture any bone, but it went within an inch of his heart, which is why he was hemorrhaging so badly.
Did he appear to have any other injuries? Could he have been hit from behind, surprised by someone?
Nothing obvious. I'm sorry, Marshal, but we won't know anything more until we do an autopsy.
I understand.
Thank you, Doctor. I appreciate your time and what you tried to do for Jack.
Less than 2 months in the new job. Shame. Oh, let's call it a night, Frank. I've got one last thing to do before I turn in, though.
Marshal Mossman left the hospital with more unanswered questions. He had lost a colleague tonight, a fellow officer, a friend, and he didn't have much in the way of leads. At Richter's bathhouse, Mossman had heard that John McNutt, night watchman and winter fire patrol, was the person who found Sturgus in the alley. McNutt had come to Alaska, a farmer, but was drawn into mining in the Nome gold rush. McNutt was in Nome in the 1900s, in the early days of that camp, and stampeded from there to Shoshana. remaining there until work started on the Alaska Railroad when he came to Anchorage. He mined for the Alaska Railroad summers, but worked in Anchorage in winter, stoking fires at night in the commercial buildings around town. Mossman hoped to catch McNutt at home at his small wood frame house up on 7th Avenue between his rounds. When he got to the house, McNutt was sitting on the front porch steps, bundled from the cold, smoking a cigar.
McNutt, I'd like to ask you a few questions.
I expected as much, but I need to get on with my rounds.
Well, let me walk with you. What can you tell me about what happened tonight?
I was just out doing my job, checking fires, stoking them up when they needed it. I just left the Hewitt building where I fixed the furnace. And there was a drunk at the foot of the stairway behind the Kivik building across from Richter's bathhouse. I tried to get him up, but he wasn't having it. So I went to look for Sturgus.
Why look for Sturgus? Why not just rouse him yourself?
I tried getting him up and moving, but that wasn't my job. Chief Sturgus always told me to just come find him, so that's what I did.
Did this happen often?
More than it should have.
Were you drinking tonight, McNutt?
Now, Marshal, you know as well as I do that it's against the law. Why would you even ask me such a thing?
Go on.
So I went out in search of Sturgus, so he could make the man go home or take him in. I went to Baxter's newsstand, as he's often there, and about halfway there I ran into Ma Baxter. I told her what I found, and then I thought I'd better keep on going on my search for Sturgus. I got as far as the Crescent Hotel.
Did you see a gun?
No. I told you I thought he was just a drunk. I wasn't looking for a gun.
What else can you tell me, McNutt?
Well, I noticed the man was groaning and was lying prone on his back. As I said earlier, he was at the foot of the stairway. I saw a hat nearby.
Well, what about the area? Did you see any sign of a struggle?
Snow was well packed, and I didn't see anything in the area. His coat was open, and his head was pointed east, if that helps.
What time did you find the man?
Well, the picture show had gotten over at the Harmony. It had just gotten over. Probably 9:15.
Did you see anyone else around? Someone you didn't recognize or someone acting suspicious?
You see what you see, Marshal, and my eyes ain't what they used to be. There's a lot of new people in town. I heard we had over 150 Chichacos roll in from Seward on Friday's train. Rumor is they didn't even have enough rooms in the hotels. They had to ask the locals to put them up in their homes.
Yes, I mean, I know that. That doesn't make it any... That makes it harder on us. Well, thanks, McNutt. I'm sure I'll have more questions later.
I know Sturgus helped arrest a lot of moonshiners lately. Do you think that might have something to do with Jack getting shot?
It's too early to tell, McNutt. Too early to tell.
Marshal Mossman parted ways with John McNutt as McNutt continued on his rounds. With more questions than answers, Mossman went back to his quarters at the U.S. Marshal's office. Only one thing was known for sure. Anchorage Chief of Police, John Jack Sturgus, was dead. Stay tuned for more after this word from our sponsors. Say, Ethel!
Yes, Fred?
Ethel, I was wondering. Every evening you pull together the best dinners.
What are you getting at?
Well, what's your secret?
Well, Fred, when money is tight, housewives from Mountain View to Spenard know the place to shop. To get the most for your dollar is Pay and Pack It. If you're looking to stock your pantry, this week's dollar deals are canned milk, 6 tall tins for $1. Yacht Club green beans, 4 number 2 tins for $1. Silver Coho salmon, 3 number 1 tins for $1. Smith's spinach, 4 2.5 number tins for $1. And Washington Gem potatoes in a 13-pound bag for just $1. Whether you're looking for boat fresh eggs or fresh apples and grapefruit, Pay and Take It has the best price anywhere in town.
Say, Ethel,
Yes, Fred?
do they sell everything for $1 down at Pay and Take It?
Not everything, Fred. My home cooking, that'll cost extra.
Pay cash and pay less at Pay and Take It, located at 324th Avenue, where your dollar buys more. While Anchorage was an incorporated city, it still operated under the territorial government of Alaska. The jail at the U.S. Marshal's office was where all of the criminals in the Cook Inlet area were locked up. The regular hotels were full from the last trainload of outsiders from Seward, and the Federal Hotel at the U.S. Marshal's office was bursting at the seams from the latest prohibition raids at Bootlegger Cove, just south of town. We find our heroes, Marshal Clarence Mossman and Deputy Marshal Frank Hoffman, at their desk, frustrated by the lack of evidence. Marshal Steve Casler was also there, attending to the prisoners.
Well, Clarence, what now?
Well, I talked to John McNutt last night.
And
nothing. I mean, he's getting old.
he's a drunk.
Hey, he does his job. Didn't tell me anything we didn't already know.
Morning, Frank, Clarence.
Stephen, how were the prisoners last night?
Quiet, sobering up.
We need a witness list. Stephen, who was at the Richters last night?
Oh, Mr. and Mrs. Richter, of course. The Baxters. Doctors Romig and Cannon, William Hunt. There were boarders, too. Maybe a few bath customers.
That's a start. Let's get to work. Yeah. Stephen, go ask around and find out who was on the street last night. Start at the box office at the Harmony Theater.
Where do you want to start, Clarence? The Baxters or the Richters?
Yeah, we need to go see Anna first.
Anna Maloney married John Jack Sturgus in a wedding at the home of friends in Seattle, Washington in 1913. Jack was a patrolman with the Everett, Washington Police Department when gold fever struck, and almost quicker than the neighborhood birds could peck up all the wedding rice, Jack and Anna set sail on a boat for Cordova. The Copper River and Northwestern Railway took them to McCarthy, and from there it was a week-long cross-country trek to Wilson Creek in the Shoshana mining district at the base of Mount Randall. Shoshana had more unlawful activity going on than mining, and Jack soon found himself carrying a gun and a badge again, this time as a deputy with the U.S. Marshal Service. As mining petered out in the Wrangles, law enforcement was needed elsewhere in the growing territory, so Jack and Anna moved to Alaska's newest city, Anchorage.
Maybe Mrs. Sturgis isn't home.
She could be resting. We have no idea what she's going through right now.
You're right. I'm going to let you do all the talking.
Clarence, Marshal Hoffman, please come in.
Anna Sturgis was a handsome woman in her late 30s. Any other day, she would have been washed and brushed and would have presented herself just so. Today, she was red-eyed and crumpled. Her hair had fallen from the neat bun she usually kept, and Marshal Mossman noted she was still wearing the dark wool dress and shawl he had seen her in at church yesterday. Her face seemed aged, even from the day before, and her eyes didn't hold the usual warm greeting for her guests. In the parlor, a blanket and pillow were on the couch, a teacup set cold on the table nearby, and a pile of hankies littered the floor. She was obviously a woman grieving.
Anna, I'm so sorry. Frank and I didn't want to bother you, but we have a few questions.
I understand. I've been expecting you. Would you like a cup of tea? Perhaps a piece of cake? I've had 3 cakes and a pie dropped off this morning, and I can't possibly eat them all.
No, thank you, Mrs. Sturgis.
Maybe a little later, Anna. Look, we don't want to be any trouble. We just have a few questions about Jack. His schedule of activities yesterday, when he was home, when did he go out?
He was home all morning. He'd been home writing letters. He went out a little in the afternoon. He came back and we had dinner, and then he went back out. He did that most evenings. He was a lawman. He took his job seriously. You know that.
Yes.
He hadn't taken his handcuffs, billy club, or papers with him, so I didn't expect him to be gone long.
Had he ever done that before? Left without his billy club, his handcuff, or papers?
Yes, once or twice, not regularly.
What next?
Ma Baxter came by looking for him. I told her he was out. She came back later with Henry, and they told me Jack had been shot and killed.
Anna, it will be all right. We will find Jack's killer. I'll ask my wife, Frederica, to come and sit with you.
She's been asking after you. She wants to know that you're all right.
My wife, Susie, is at the Crescent. I'll have her come by, too.
Thank you. Thank you both. I just need some time.
Good day, Mrs. Sturgus.
Good day.
I'm glad to be out of there.
Well, I hate to leave Anna like that, alone. She's doing better than I thought she would be, though.
She's a strong woman. I may still ask Susie to go check on her later.
That's probably a good idea. It wouldn't hurt for her to have some company.
Hasn't she worked with Frederica on the Women of Moose Heart Legion Committee?
Yes, they have worked together. I know Frederica is always trying to help someone.
I suspect she's probably responsible for one of the cakes Anna received.
It's about women and those damn cakes when someone dies.
I wouldn't mind knowing more about those letters he was writing. Are they important?
What were those letters Sturgus was writing? Why had he left home without his handcuffs, billy club, and papers? The questions continue unanswered for our heroes, with more questions to come after this word from our sponsors. Say, friends, are you members of the Anchorage Co-op? Join now. Membership in the Co-op, a profit-sharing institution, gives you many advantages in buying and saving. The people's own store. Buy your groceries at a savings and watch your food bill drop. All Co-op profits are reimbursed to stockholders in cash, merchandise, or additional stock, as determined by members' votes. The Co-op is the only profit-sharing grocery in town. The Anchorage Co-op on 5th Avenue next to the USO is where you'll shop best. With macaroni, 5 pounds for $1, and coffee just 53 cents for a 1-pound can, you can't go wrong at the store that you and I own, the Anchorage Co-op. What's more, the Anchorage Co-op stocks Gilman's Wholesome Baked Goods and Shamrock Baked Goods from Palmer. Our prices are not specials. They are everyday prices. The Anchorage Co-op on 5th Avenue next to the USO. In any town, in every time, there are pillars of society. Church is one of the pillars of every community, and Anna was a devout Catholic. Civic societies are another pillar, and Jack was a member of both the Anchorage Lodge of Elks and the Grand Lodge of Protection of the Loyal Order of Moose, while Anna was a member of the Moose Heart Legion. While gambling was illegal, card parties were all the rage, with whist and bridge being among the most popular. For the single man, there were plenty of pool halls up and down 4th Avenue, and a number of immoral houses on C Street between 6th and 9th Avenues. For the lonely hearts, there was the Bridgman's Club. The Bridgemen paid for the passage north of women of marriageable age and a chaperone to meet lonely men of the territory. The wood stove at Baxter's newsstand was yet another pillar of community in Anchorage. Marshals Mossman and Hoffman were headed there now. Baxter's newsstand, normally abuzz with chatter about the goings-on in Anchorage and gossip aplenty, was unusually quiet. When the marshals arrived, they found the Baxters clearly shaken up and shocked by the murder. The wood stove was ablaze in the corner with a large pot of coffee warming there. The store was filled with stacks of newspapers and boxes of cigars. Candy jars and sundries occupied the shop counter. There were a number of chairs set near the wood stove. And that was where the marshals found Ma and Henry Baxter. Ma in a rocking chair, a tissue in her hand, tears in her eyes. Henry beside her, cradling a cup of coffee.
Good morning, Mrs. Baxter. Henry. I'm sorry to bother you both, but Frank and I have questions about last night.
Of course, gentlemen. We've been expecting you.
What can you tell us?
I was here while Ma, Lyle, and Opal were at the theatre. I didn't hear anything until Ma came and got me.
Ma?
Well, I was coming back from the early show at the Harmony Theater with my son Lyle and his wife Opal. As you know, our apartment is just a few doors down from here, above the Anchorage drugstore. We saw Jack, Chief Sturgus, out there on 4th Avenue when I was headed in to stoke the fire. He was acting peculiar, but I didn't think much of it at the time. But you know, while I was tending the fire, I started to worry, so I went back outside. I didn't see him on 4th Avenue or here at the newsstand, so I went to talk to Anna, his wife. Well, she told me he was out.
Not knowing what to do, I headed home, and that's where I saw John McNutt. And then, John told me there was a drunk in the alley and that he was looking for Chief Sturgus to rouse the man. I thought it seemed strange, so I went behind the drugstore, and I recognized Jack right away, lying on the cold ground.
So you saw him lying there, and you recognized him right away?
Yes, I did. And he recognized me as well. I knelt down beside him, and he called me Ma. He was lying on the snow, groaning, throwing his head from side to side. I could tell he was badly hurt, and I knew there was nothing I could do for him alone.
What did you do then?
Well, I called for help. No one answered, so I came here and got Henry and the others.
Is there anything else you think we should know about, Mrs. Baxter? Has anyone strange been hanging around? Anyone seem to be bothering Mr. Sturgus?
I do recall that he was acting peculiar during the early afternoon when he stopped by the store for a visit. He seemed distant.
Could he have been shot during a fight? Maybe he came upon someone in the alley and they struggled. Do you think we're all in danger with a murderer on the loose? We could put together a vigilance committee.
That won't be necessary, Henry. We need to keep our heads calm. Regarding a fight, anything's possible. We're gathering facts right now. We appreciate your time.
After leaving Baxter's, the Marshals went around to the alley and over to Richter's bathhouse to speak with the Richter family. It was to Richter's bathhouse that Chief Sturgus had been taken when he was found shot.
Mrs. Richter, may we have a word with you?
Of course, gentlemen. I was expecting you sooner. Please come sit in the parlor. It's more private there. Would you care for some coffee, something to eat?
No, thank you.
Yes, I would. It's been a long morning and cold out to boot. Thank you.
The alley between 3rd and 4th Avenues was not the narrow alley you know today. It was more of a secondary street lacking sidewalks, with many businesses like Richter's bathhouse fronting the alley. The Richters opened the bathhouse in 1917. Ernest Richter was a miner who built the building to give his wife Martha and son Ernest a safe haven while he spent time away from the city mining at Willow Camp. Martha busied herself maintaining the Turkish baths and tending to boarders.
I brought you some strudel to go with your coffee, Marshal Hoffman. I'm well known for it in town, and I thought you might want to try some.
Thank you for both, Mrs. Richter.
I will send you both home with strudel for your wives. Now, what can I tell you today to help with your investigation?
Tell us what you saw. Start at the beginning.
My son Ernest and I were heading home from the Harmony movie theater about 9:15. We had just watched Sahara. It was a good show. Probably a little too much for my Ernest. He's only 10, you know, but he's such a dear boy.
Yes, he seems like a nice young man, a hard worker.
Well, you know children. Sometimes he wants little things from the store, so I let him help me around here, and he earns a little spending money. But about last night, we were walking home, and we heard what sounded like a gunshot.
Where were you at that time?
We were near the end of the alley, next to Hotel Anchorage. I did not see anything, did not hear a commotion, nobody running away from where the sound of the shot was or something like that. I wish I could say I say something, but I did not.
Was it dark in the alley behind your place?
As you know, we have the little light out back. It lights up a considerable portion of the alley. That's important when I walk Ernest with me. He gets a little scared of the dark.
What then?
We came home. Oh, we saw Mrs. Keeley. She had seen a flash, and while we were talking, we saw someone at the back of the Liberty Cafe. I put Ernest to bed, and I noticed a commotion in the alley a short while later. That's when I heard Chief Sturgus had been shot. I had the men there bring him in here, right here in the parlor, to warm him up until the wagons came. I did not see him again. This is very terrible. Who would want to hurt a nice man like Chief Sturgus?
We just don't know.
But we're working diligently to find out. Did you have customers in the bathhouse last night?
Yes, of course. We have customers every night. But they all said they did not see or hear anything.
What about your boarders? I know you have a number of them as well.
Oh, yes, I hear from them today. They all say how upset they are, but they had not seen or heard anything.
Thank you. If you talk to anyone who did see or hear something, please let us know right away.
And thank you for the strudel. I'm sure Susie will appreciate your gift.
Marshal Mossman and Marshal Hoffman agreed to meet up later after lunching with their wives. They would test fire Sturgis's pistol and head back to the office in hopes that Marshal Casler would have returned by then with information obtained canvassing the streets. Shots heard and seen. A man found shot and dying. More murder gone cold after this news break. We now break for a historic Anchorage Radio Hour news update for Friday, March 14th, 1947. Cedric Goulon, local pilot, was forced to make a landing in a field near Mountain View this morning when fog obscured Merrill Field and prevented a landing there. Goulon was en route here from Upper Russian Lake in a ski-equipped Taylorcraft. When he spotted an opening in the fog, he set the plane down. The pilot was unhurt and the plane was not damaged. In other news, a rash of stolen automobiles confronted the city police over the weekend, but of 6 cars reported stolen, 5 had been recovered up until noon today. A youth was accused of stealing 2 cars, but police said no charges would be placed against him. According to Paul Goodrich, sergeant of detectives, the youth first took 1 car Saturday night and drove it until he got stuck. He left this car in the mud, climbed into a second car, and wrecked this one near Merrill Field. The owner of the first car does not intend to press a charge. The youth has promised to settle with the owner of the second car, according to the police. In happier news, Alaska can expect a booming tourist business for the next 10 years, limited only by the territory's ability to house visitors. A.P. Stanfield of the International and Domestic Travel Service said today. Everyone wants to see Alaska, and soon, Mr. Stanfield said, explaining that the Canadian lines are booked solidly throughout the summer, and the Alaska Highway will take a beating too. He predicted that if all the people who want to drive north can get past Canadian customs, trailer cities will spring up all along the route. Tune in at the top of the hour for national and international news. We return you now to the historic Anchorage Radio Hour's presentation of Murder Gone Cold. The headline in Monday's Anchorage Daily Times read, Chief of Police Sturgis found dead. The paper went on to say, between the hours of 9:15 and 9:30 last night, Chief of Police Jack Sturgis was shot through the breast while at the rear of the Anchorage Drugstore and the Liberty Cafe, and expired on the operating table at the Anchorage Hospital at 10:50. Deputy Marshal Stephen Casler was taking a late lunch when Marshal Clarence Mossman and Deputy Marshal Frank Hoffman came into the office.
Have you seen the paper?
Not yet.
They're already spreading rumors. We don't know anything about the crime yet, and Heron at the Daily Times is already saying moonshiners did it.
Now, we can't worry about the paper. We've got a murder to investigate.
Well, did you find out anything from the gun firings?
The bullet matches bullets we fired from Sturgis's gun.
It was the 32 and a 45 frame that I gave him when he moved to Anchorage. What did you pick up this morning from the townspeople?
There's a number of them out and about last night. The picture over at the Harmony had just ended, and it was pretty much a full house. The show let out a little after 9, maybe 9:15. I made a list of those people I think are worth interviewing. William Hunt helped carry the chief over to the Richters. You probably remember seeing him there. Archie Adams was returning from the show and says he heard what sounded like a gunshot. Poppas was at his coffee shop. He said he heard a gunshot as well. They should all be interviewed.
What about where Sturgis was found last night? I know you stayed behind to check it out after we left. What can you tell us?
Well, after Baxter, Hunt, and the others took Sturgis over to Richter's, I looked the area over. Saw a lot of footprints, but I don't think we'll get anything there. They just can't identify anything new or suspicious. I didn't see any sign of a struggle. As you know, I did find his gun near the body, just a few feet away. Showed signs that it had recently been fired and one shell casing was empty.
Wasn't he in the habit of carrying 2 guns?
Yes, he was. In fact, they were 2 different calibers. And so far, we have no sign of the other gun. Well, yet.
This is all anyone is talking about today. With a number of people who may have seen or heard something, no one really saw or heard anything useful.
We always get a few townspeople who love to make up wild stories about what might have happened, but no good ever comes from them.
So let's look at what we have. What did the autopsy say? Have the doctors completed it yet?
Dr. Romig said the autopsy failed to substantiate the theory that Sturgus was hit in the head before he was shot.
I think it's time we go talk to more witnesses. Mr. Hunt, Mr. Adams, Mr. Poppas.
Oh, and we should also talk to Mrs. Keeley.
Well, I need to get back to work. I have a few things I need to finish up with so I can get back to Valdez. Essie doesn't like it when I'm away too long.
With Prohibition barely a year old, coffee in Anchorage was more popular then than it is even now. There was at least one coffee shop on every corner, and occasionally 2 or 3. Louis Poppas's coffee shop was on E Street, across the alley from the Hotel Anchorage. The Marshals found Poppas cleaning the counter in his tiny coffee house.
Mr. Poppas, we need to talk with you about last night. Do you have a few minutes?
Yes, of course. My customers have been talking about nothing else. Chief Sturgus, he was a good man. He come here for coffee every morning. His wife, she makes tea, you know, so he comes for some of my strong coffee.
What can you tell us about what happened in the alley behind your establishment last night?
I hear a gunshot. I couldn't tell its position, but when I heard the noise, I went out the back door. It sounded like a small rifle, like a .22. I don't have any customers at the time. I like to wait about 1 hour after Sunday show because the customers, they like to get a cup of coffee on their way home.
Did you see anyone in or near the alley?
Yes, I saw only Mrs. Richter and Mrs. Keeley, no one else.
Have you seen or heard anything from your patrons that might help?
People, they talk, gossip and rumor. Even I can see that.
If you hear something you think might be important or helpful to the case, please let us know.
Thank you, Mr. Poppas.
With nothing new from Poppas, the Marshals headed to find Mrs. Lillian Keeley. Mrs. Keeley had recently married Patrick Keeley. Patrick was a bridge carpenter for the railroad. He built his home from scratch rather than purchasing a mail-order house through Sears and Roebuck. Patrick built a frame house, not a log cabin like so many other of the townsfolk. Mrs. Keeley worked nights at the hospital, and the Marshals hoped it was late enough in the afternoon that she would be awake.
Yes?
Mrs. Keeley, we're sorry to bother you, but we need to ask you a few questions.
I understand. Please come in and have a seat. Can I get you anything?
No, thank you.
We're fine, thank you. We'd like to ask you about last night on your way to work. What did you see or hear regarding Chief Sturgus being shot?
Well, I was heading to the hospital going down the alley between 3rd and 4th. I saw a flash of a gun. I heard what might have been a gunshot. It sounded muffled. I was so surprised when they brought Chief Sturgus into the hospital. That could have been me.
Where were you at the time?
Well, I was at the rear of the vacant lot fronting on 4th, between the Kyvig and Shaw buildings.
Where was the flash coming from?
Oh, I would say in the rear of the Kyvig building.
And what time was that, Mrs. Keeley?
Oh, it must have been 15 or 20 minutes past 9. I left the house last night at 9 to walk to work. I start work at 10, and I like to give myself plenty of time, you know. Patrick often walks with me, but he wasn't able to last night.
You didn't see or hear anything unusual in the alley?
I watch for anyone in the area, and I was a little nervous to be alone, but I didn't see any disturbance or any sign of a struggle.
So you didn't see anyone else?
Not right then. I stayed put until I saw Mrs. Richter and her darling son. When I stopped to speak with her, we noticed someone near the back of the Liberty Cafe.
Is there anything else you remember?
No, I'm sorry. You'll be happy to know that my husband Patrick did say he will make sure that I don't have to walk to work alone when I have the late shift. At least not until that killer's found.
Thank you, Mrs. Keeley.
On their way to question Oscar Anderson, the Marshals bumped into Archie Adams in front of the Frisco Cafe. The Frisco is yet another early Anchorage social hub. Unlike Louis Poppas's cubbyhole of a cafe, the Frisco was grand, with more than a dozen tables, and they often hosted private parties and wedding receptions.
Mr. Adams? Mr. Adams, we'd like to speak with you about last night.
Certainly. It's cold. Let's step into the cafe.
What can you tell us about what happened last night?
I was returning from the show over at the Harmony when I heard a gunshot. It sounded like it came from behind the Kyvig building.
That didn't bother you, hearing what could have been a gunshot, and you didn't wonder what it was?
I even listened to see if I could hear anything else. see anyone running away, any signs of a struggle, but nothing.
Where were you at the time?
I was on the north side of 4th, between Kivig and the Shaw building.
What time was that?
About 9:15.
Did you see anyone else?
I did see someone walking quickly in the alley. I didn't know who it was at the time, but now with everyone talking about it, I assume it must have been Mrs. Keeley.
Thank you, Mr. Adams.
Oscar Anderson was next on the Marshal's list. Anderson was a Swedish immigrant who, by his own account, was the 18th person to arrive in the tent city of Ship Creek. The Marshals found Oscar in his butcher shop on 4th.
Marshals, welcome. What a wild night. Do you know who shot Chief Sturgus?
Not yet, Oscar.
Can you tell us anything about what happened last night, Mr. Anderson?
Oscar, please call me Oscar. Everyone in Anchorage calls me Oscar. I leave here around 9 o'clock and run into Chief Sturgus shortly after in front of the Kivig building. It was probably just a few minutes later that I hear a gunshot, but I don't think anything of it.
You didn't see anyone else? No one running away after the shot?
No, I was a few blocks away by then. I was getting late and I needed to get home to my wife and children. I have 3 children, and my 2 sons, they are rambunctious and fighting all the time.
Is there anything else, you can tell us? Have any of your customers mentioned anything?
No, there is only gossip, lots of talk about moonshiners, like papers say, but no one says anything else.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Oscar. Doesn't sound like Sturgus was in the alley spying on anyone if he was seen out on 4th Avenue right before the shooting.
I agree. I'm finding this one frustrating, Frank. He was one of us. And as Frederica feeling a bit skittish about our work. She says if it can happen to a man like Jack, it can happen to any one of us.
I know. It doesn't look like being chief of police is all that good for his health.
Getting little from Oscar Anderson, the Marshals proceeded to William Hunt's machine shop at the corner of 7th and F. Hunt was a machinist, and his shop worked on everything from wagons to special parts that the railroad machine shop could not produce. Hunt's shop was abuzz with activity, and the Marshals had to wait for the noise to pipe down before they could catch Hunt's attention.
What? William? William!
Huh?
Can we have a few minutes of your time?
Well, I'm pretty busy right now, but I guess I can spare a few.
What can you tell us about last night?
The weather? Are you talking about that no-account Sturgus?
We're not here about the weather, Mr. Hunt.
My party and I were returning from the first picture show over at the Harmony when we met Sturgus in front of the Hewitt building. Seeing Sturgus reminded me I needed shaving powder. So I went back to Baxter's newsstand.
Did you talk with him then?
No.
Did you see Sturgus again that night?
Yeah, you know I did. I came and got you.
Would you please continue?
Well, I helped carry him to the Richter's bathhouse after Ma Baxter found him. When I got to the alley, Mr. Sturgus was groaning, and he said his head hurt. He said, Bobby.
Do you know what he meant by that?
No, I don't. Sorry.
Is there anything else?
His Mackinaw and coat were unbuttoned.
What about his vest?
Maybe the top 2 buttons were undone.
Anything else?
I didn't see any signs of a struggle. I looked for a gun on him, but I didn't see one. Also, he might have been there for a little bit as the snow was clinging to his hair in frozen clumps when we helped him up off the ground.
Is there more?
No. Look, I need to get back to work. This new order from the railroad's a pain.
The Marshals headed back to their office to review the witness reports from the day.
Nobody knows anything, Clarence. It's frustrating.
This is disturbing, Frank. Why hadn't John McNutt recognized Sturgus when Ma Baxter had recognized him right away? And what about Ma's story? She was all over town. Now let's take a closer look at these notes.
McNutt said he came upon a man at 9:15 and went out in search of Sturgus after trying to wake the unknown person. Ma Baxter said she came home from the show about 9:15, passed Sturgus acting strange, went in and stoked her fires, and then she worried about him, and so she went back out to find him. She stopped by both the newsstand and Sturgis's house, then, coming back, ran into McNutt, who alerted her to the unknown man. Unless her watch stopped, There's something not quite right with Ma's timetable.
It doesn't make sense to me that there were so many people within a block or two and no one saw anything.
Lillian and Keeley saw a flash, but neither a gunman or Sturgus.
Mrs. Richter heard a shot but didn't see Sturgis or the gunman either.
I think even more disturbing is that so many people heard the gunshot, but no one did anything.
What about Mr. Hunt's statement that Sturgis said Bobby Bobby as he lay there in the alley?
Do we have anyone named Robert on the witness list?
I don't think so. Casler didn't put any Roberts on his list. You think Henry Baxter will start a vigilance committee? I don't think we can handle the mob.
I don't think we need to take Henry's suggestion seriously.
Other than bootleggers out of town, Anchorage is mostly a peaceful community.
Well, what now?
Well, let's call it a night and see what we can come up with tomorrow.
Later that evening, Marshal Mossman walked back into the dark alley and stood there where his friend and colleague Jack Sturgis had been fatally shot just the day before. With the light from Richter's bathhouse behind him, he couldn't help but wonder again what had happened that night. Why hadn't Sturgis told him what he was doing in the alley? Why had Sturgis left his house without his money, handcuffs, and billy club? More importantly, who had shot Jack Sturgis? And why didn't Sturgis expose the murderer? Had he been investigating someone that night? Perhaps just out for a walk? Or was he protecting someone with his silence? Clarence Mossman, U.S. Marshal for Alaska, went home that night desperately needing a good night's sleep. He was too tired even to answer his wife Frederica's many questions about the case, and really not having any answers for her anyway. How could this murder have so many witnesses, yet no solid leads? Stay tuned for more Murder Gone Cold after these words from our sponsors. Say, Ethel.
Yes, Fred?
You know, spam may be all the rage with the GIs at Fort Richardson, but
Go on, Fred, spit it out.
I like my meat fresher.
I know, Fred. That's why I shop at Ship Creek Market.
Ship Creek Market?
You know the place on 4th Avenue between Moto Day Gifts and J. Vic Brown and Sons Jewelers.
Right. What makes their meat so special?
They carry nothing but the best. Cube steak, T-bone steak, sirloin steak, round of veal, T-bone and sirloin veal, rib steak, pork chops, all carved fresh daily.
What about game?
Game, oh brother, they've got game. Fresh local chicken, seafood, rabbits, cheese, lard, ham, and hamburger. They've got lamb, liver, and assorted cold meats too.
Gee, Ethel, they've got everything.
Yes, they do. Wait a minute, I forgot something.
What did you forget?
Bacon.
Bacon. When nothing but the best will do, visit Ship Creek Market, open daily at 535 4th Avenue. News on the death of Police Chief John Jack Sturgis spread in the newspapers from Nome to Oregon. The reports of what happened varied, ranging from Chief of Police at Anchorage is slain after raid to Anchorage Police Chief killed by bullet from his own gun and Anchorage Police Chief killed by moonshiners. No headline was more true than the Seattle Post-Intelligencer from Friday, February 25th. Anchorage murder veiled in mystery.
Good morning, Frank. Thanks for coming by. I know Susie was hoping to spend the morning with you shopping, but, well, I appreciate your time.
Well, you know how much I love shopping, so I'm glad you requested my help. What do we need to do today?
Judge Leopold David stopped by earlier and gave me an order to find 6 qualified jurors this morning for a coroner's inquest at 2:30 today.
I put a list together. Let's get this over to the Judge David for his approval and get these men rounded up. The jurors and the witnesses all need to appear before Judge David this afternoon, and all the jurors will need to go to Mr. Williams's undertaking parlor after that. We can talk to Mr. Williams then. I'd like to ask him a few questions.
At the inquest on the afternoon of February 23rd, the jurors determined that John Jack Sturgis, age 60, came to his death at Anchorage, Alaska on the 20th day of February, 1921 at about 9:15 p.m. That death was due to a gunshot wound injuring the heart and other organs. The inquest further stated that the gunshot which caused the death of John J. Sturgis was fired from a gun in the hands of parties unknown with intent to kill. The jury present certified this in writing and under oath after inspecting the body and listening to the testimony. After the inquest, jurors and witnesses headed home, leaving the marshals at the mortuary to speak with Mr. D.H. Williams. Williams, one of the few undertakers in town, also served on the city council. He had been silent when the judge and jurors had been examining Sturgis's body, and while they conferred about the evidence afterwards. The marshals waited for Williams in the parlor of his small funeral home.
I'm glad that's over.
What do you mean?
The funeral service is tomorrow. You planning on sticking around for a few more days, or are you heading back to Matanuska?
I'm sticking around. I owe it to Jack. The service. It's at Robards at 2:30?
Yeah, that's right. Father Markham.
Gentlemen, I don't think I can help you with last night when Mr. Sturgis died. I wasn't out. I was at home with my wife. Can I help you with anything else?
We want to know about Sturgis's body, Mr. Williams. What can you tell us?
As they mentioned in the inquest, there were powder burns on his shirt and vest, so he must have been shot at close range. The gun was fired from above him, the bullet traveling from beside his heart down into his lower back.
Was there any bruising on his head or back, as if he'd been struck?
None that I noticed.
Thank you, Councilman Williams. Did the city council choose a replacement police chief today?
Yes, we chose Nathan Kitzmiller.
The carpenter?
Yes, we think he'll do a good job.
With the coroner's inquest closed and mortician D.H. Williams offering no new evidence, the marshals were stumped. Where will our story go from here? Stay tuned for more Murder Gone Cold after this word from our sponsors. What's new at Lusac Drugstore?
The music counter at their 4th and D location with the latest phonographic records. They have a smorgasbord of songs and toe-tapping medleys from your radio favorites. Frankie Lane, Joe Stafford, and Bing Crosby. Enjoy Across the Alley from the Alamo. And the Mills Brothers, Chibaba by Perry Como. The Glenn Miller Orchestra. And for you Bobby Soxers, they have the voice of Frank Sinatra. The first studio album by Columbia's Recordings, Brightest Star.
And there's no hurt like forgetting Mother's Day. Remember the finest mother in the world with the finest candy in the world. Nora's exquisite candies in both the variety and peach tree boxes, beautifully attired in Mother's Day decorations. For a more lasting Mother's Day gift, they have perfumes, stationery, household appliances, cosmetics, and glassware. Lusac's Drugstore, with 2 downtown locations for all your personal needs. Go see them at the record counter at 4th and D opposite the Harmony Theater or their original store at 4th and E. Wednesday, February 23rd. The city of Anchorage offered a reward of $1,000 for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the murderer or murderers of Police Chief John Jack Sturgis. In addition, the mayor pledged $250 and the 6 members of the city council and the city clerk each pledged $100. Thursday, February 24th. There was a short memorial held at Robarts Hall in the early afternoon. Then Anchorage buried John Jack Sturgis in a simple plot along Cordova Street in Anchorage Memorial Cemetery. Friday, February 25th. U.S. Marshal Clarence Mossman advised the Anchorage Daily Times that the Federal Department of Justice is leaving nothing undone to unravel the mystery of the Sturgis case, which still continues to baffle the energetic officers. Nothing of a tangible nature has been discovered to date. Saturday, February 26th. Frank and Susie Hoffman go home to Matanuska. Widow Anna Sturgis wrote a note of thanks in the Anchorage Daily Times with her best wishes, thanking the Benevolent Protective Order of Elks. Monday, March 8th. Seattle Post-Intelligencer. The killing of Jack Sturgis, Anchorage Chief of Police, remains as much of a mystery today, 2 weeks later, as it did immediately after the incident.
There are events in every man's life that make them question their future.
The murder of my friend Jack Sturgus, Anchorage's first chief of police, was that event for me.
Keeping the peace in a peaceful town is easy enough to do. But this?
There were rumors that Jack had taken his own life. I don't buy it. He wasn't that sort of man.
And there were rumors that it was moonshiners. The U.S. Marshal Service, not Jack Sturgus, did all the still busting in the territory.
There were a lot of witnesses, but nobody saw anything.
When you spend more time looking over your shoulder than you do looking for clues, it might be time to hang up your badge.
With no leads and no information, the trail faded away in a case of murder gone cold.
To this day, the murder of Anchorage's first chief of police remains unsolved. The name of Jack Sturgis's killer died with Sturgis on that February night. The killer may still be at large. Thus ends a case of murder gone cold. Join U.S. Marshal Clarence Mossman and Deputy U.S. Marshal Frank Hoffman for a tale of ragtime, vaudeville, and white slavery in the next installment of the historic Anchorage Radio Hour, coming soon to a radio near you.